everybody, and welcome to this webinar about how a customer data platform such as Tealium's can connect your customer data to the customer experiences that lie at the very heart of your business. We've called our webinar The Strategic Power of CDPs and AI for Elevating Customer Experiences. I'm Brian McKenna. I'm one of the analysts at Tech Target's Enterprise Strategy Group. I focus on business applications, especially customer experience, but also for 12 years I covered data management as the business applications editor at Computer Weekly here in the UK. And I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Parisi, who is the Director of Product Marketing at Tealium. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Matt, maybe you could just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do at Tealium.
Absolutely. I am the Director of Product Marketing at Tealium, so I work with our product team to kind of define the most valuable use cases and make sure that our customers know about them to ultimately help solve their problems. I've been at Tealium for about 8 years, and prior to Tealium, I worked at digital marketing agencies for basically my entire career, managing media, managing website, managing online marketing campaigns, and so I've been around since kind of the genesis of a lot of these marketing technology tools like Google Analytics and Google AdWords and Meta. Fun to see where the market has come since way back when I got my start at a company like Tealium that works with data from so many of those places.
Fantastic. That was a brilliant kind of experience there that you've got there to bring to our conversation today. So Matt's in San Diego. I'm in my home office in Oxford. I expect the weather's probably better in San Diego than it is here.
Today it's a little cloudy, but it's still about 70, which is I think in the UK maybe that's like 20, what is that, like 22, 23 maybe?
Yeah, early 20s Celsius, yeah. So Matt and I are going to chat about how companies, I guess other organizations, can make their customer experience programs truly strategic by differentiating on how they manage and how they capitalize on their customer data, how they connect their customer data sources with what their businesses actually do, how CDPs are integral to that, how AI is in the mix, but also how CDPs can bring people together, sort of technical people, marketing professionals being the kind of prime example. Does that sound good to you, Matt?
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
So I've got a few questions for Matt, but before we get into those, I'd like to share a couple of data points from Enterprise Strategy Group research, and these are from a study entitled Data Governance in the Age of AI. We did this research in the spring of this year, around 300 or so respondents in US and Canada. Just a couple of data points here. So 70% of respondents assigned a high or a very high priority to data quality and data integrity in AI-driven initiatives, which is reassuring. 80% said they understood less than half of their data for AI from a data lineage perspective. So that could be a bit concerning in the long run. So what we have there is a high emphasis on the importance of data quality, but a certain lack of understanding of data lineage. And this is regarding AI initiatives, let's not forget, which is pretty much everyone's cutting edge. Still early days with AI in the enterprise. I was at a conference last week, Matt, and somebody said to me that we're in the BlackBerry stage of enterprise AI, which I've shamelessly stolen that. But I thought it was quite an interesting comment.
It's a good metaphor, you know.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Both innovative but also dated.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it captures things quite well. So turning to you, Matt, more squarely. So a customer data platform, I mean, what's the role of that? I mean, surely companies and organizations have, they're not short of data lakes or data warehouses on the one hand, And nor are they short, on the other hand, of data analytics tools and BI tools and things like that. So where does Tealium fit in with its customer data platform?
Right. Yeah. The most basic way of describing it is customer data platforms are a system to kind of manage the chaos of customer data that you've got going on across all the various places you might be engaging your customers, from the website to social media to, your email programs. Ultimately, most companies are engaging customers across 5, 6, 7, 8, 15, 20 channels, and it can become a hassle to kind of get that data all together to understand what's going on and then make use of that data in all of those channels in order to provide kind of a consistent customer experience. So you mentioned data warehouses and analytics tools. There are no shortage of systems that have specific purposes, right? Data warehouses and data lakes for storage, analytics and business intelligence tools for visualizing data. Customer data platform really focuses on the data itself and supplies the data to those systems in a format and at a time when it's most, the company is able to get the most benefit out of, engaging with a customer, or analyzing their behavior.
And real time's important from your point of view as Tealium, yeah.
It was one of our founding principles, that real time is kind of by default. So if we have to integrate with a system that can't actually work in real time, it actually takes us a little bit more work to work on that system, because we have to slow down the flow of data. But I don't know about you and your customer experiences, but when I'm trying to get answers or buy something, I want to do that as fast as possible. So it's really in a company's best interest because of kind of ever rising customer expectations.
So something like a cloud data warehouse would be a complementary technology to CDP.
I would view the CDP as more complementary to the cloud data warehouse, because the cloud data warehouse is probably going to be more of the center of the universe as far as data goes, like data storage. But as we know, nobody's got a perfect data warehouse. You've probably also got data in tools like your CRM system, or I mentioned marketing automation earlier, but there's going to be kind of a variety of, you can think of them almost as centers of gravity. You've probably got a few different centers of data gravity across your organization, and CDPs kind of bring them closer together, so that you can get better value out of it ultimately.
Yeah, complexity is always a thing that kind of kills organizations or causes them big problems. Now I know at Tealium you talk about the data layer or a data layer. Explain to me. I mean, what is your understanding of a data layer, and how does that fit into CX strategies?
Sure. Yeah. The data layer is, you could both think about it very abstractly, just as kind of a layer in your stack where the kind of data is is kind of centralized. But you can also think of it, there is like literally a technical thing called the data layer, where your data definitions are. But ultimately, what the data layer is, um, we talked about customers engaging across all of these various channels. All of these channels have a different way of using their data to describe what's going on. The data layer is meant to be kind of a central definition of how you view your customer behavior in your company's terms, not in the terms of some vendor, some tool that you're using out there. So the data layer serves to kind of map all this complexity of data out there to your business's definition of the customer and how you view the customer. It might be great that my email marketing tool can identify someone that they call a VIP, but within my business I probably have my own definition of a VIP that I want to use, not only in that one channel but across all channels.
Yeah, and it's very kind of business specific. I mean, I know that the DNA of Tealium is kind of consulting because it was originally a consulting organization
Mhm,
that then went into software. But I mean, talking of because businesses are composed of people, right? I
mhm.
mean, and this is more of a people question. I mean, would you say that the CDP is a great space for like the different tribes I mentioned at the beginning, technical people, IT people, data professionals, marketing professionals, all those people working in a business to collaborate? Does a CDP offer, in your experience at your customers, does it offer a space where those folks kind of come together and work together?
Yeah, our most successful customers are absolutely the ones that are most cross-functional and kind of able to communicate together for the benefit of the business. And I do think that customer data is one of the best central strategic things for the business to collaborate on cross functionally, because ultimately that data is the view of the customer. So if you talk about being customer centric, what better thing to centralize your collaboration around than that view, as it's represented by data of the customer.
And when it comes, so to speak, to the business end of data, when marketers and other business professionals interpret data using analytics, using BI tools, and actually take actions like running campaigns and things like that, what's the role of a CDP there? Or by that time, has the CDP kind of is no longer as relevant? It's more relevant at a stage before. I mean, where does it fit in terms of the kind of the value chain of data?
Sure, it's as different CDPs have different approaches to kind of how they manage the data. Tealium is what we call we refer to it as a vendor neutral CDP, which means basically that we don't build up stack. We focus purely at the data layer. So, like, we don't build an email tool or a website personalization tool, but there are CDPs who either have that within their CDP or they have a complementary tool under the same brand. Um, but we find that when ultimately, if you do that, then you start making decisions for the benefit of the channel instead of the view of the customer in the data. So you'll actually end up making decisions that you run into issues in the future when maybe that channel's not popular anymore, but the underlying data is always important, always something that you want to utilize no matter how behavior ultimately changes. That data, that representation of the customer, is going to help you. But um, for like a channel level marketer, a marketer who's working in email or display, um, they should understand kind of how the CDP segments the audience. But ultimately, if the CDP is doing a good job, data is just something they don't have to worry about as much anymore, because of the fact that it's been well managed upstream of where that tool is. So there's definitely some understanding of kind of the data foundation that is helpful in each channel. But yeah, you know, marketers usually have kind of a technical arm, like the marketing operations team. Um, and the marketing operations team might be the one that's working more actively day to day in the CDP. And then if you're the channel marketer, you're kind of inheriting the benefit of having a really well segmented audience that you can then use in your channel, with great understanding of what customers are in there and what you can do to provide a great experience.
Okay, cool. Look, let's turn to the topic of the hour, AI. So where does AI fit in with Tealium? Um, Especially thinking about the future of data strategy for the customers that you talk about there, and in terms of safeguarding trust. I mean, how are you thinking, and how do you think that we should think about artificial intelligence?
Sure. Um, in a way, artificial intelligence is just like all of the other things we're trying to do with the data, just like analytics, just like personalization. There's a foundation of data that needs to be in place in order for that, tactic or strategy to produce good results. And that's why data is ultimately so valuable and so important, because it's one central thing that you can optimize that will benefit you in, a lot of different ways. So it's a really nice way to scale the value of how you understand your customer. So, but AI does have some particular needs in regard to how you're using it, just like those other channels that I mentioned. So, AI, real time data is very important for AI, so that it can, because AI is going to help you with kind of managing the scale of the data that's out there by automating kind of your decision making out of that data. So, um, so it needs a variety of data, and it needs that data in real time. And you mentioned the fact that the data needs to be consented. Otherwise, you're going to create a whole bunch of risk in your business, because you're not going to be able to kind of track back to what you did and really make sure that you're following all the rules and doing all the things that you need to do with the data. So really, for AI, data needs to be consented. It needs to be real time. It needs to be filtered to be appropriate for whatever you're trying to do with that data. So it requires some good mastery of the data itself. But I typically think of AI in kind of three buckets as it relates to, the data. There's number one, AI requires the data. So you've got to manage the data in a particular way to get AI value. Number two, AI can help you with productivity. It can help you bring down the technical bar of doing really complicated things. So you see a lot of these co-pilots, and Tealium is building a co-pilot as well, where data management is a technical topic. What if you could just type in make me an audience segment of people who are have made X number of purchases and have been on the website in the last week, so that when they show up again, I can give them an offer or do something to create, a business outcome. But ultimately, by having that co-pilot, it takes something that was once very technical and opens it up, it democratizes it to more of the business. And then the third bucket is recommendations and intelligence. Um, Making logic out of this mass of data that's coming in, because as a human, I only have so much scale. So if I can set up some rules, I can give the AI some guidance, it can help kind of do decision making at scale, with the human kind of in the loop. So those are kind of the three ways that I think about it, and Tealium kind of helps in each of those three buckets.
No, thanks, Matt. That's helpful. And I think what you're describing there is a mix both of traditional AI, machine learning based, predictive, but also generative AI to help with the productivity um, aspect. Yeah,
That's
it's a
and that's a
mix.
great point too. That Yeah, the generative AI does get a lot of attention these days, but other methods of AI are a little bit more mature in the market, like predictive or propensity scores, which we released our ML product back in 20, I think it was 2020. So it was so some of these methods have been around for a
Yeah,
while. So don't lose sight of kind of the whole AI picture for just
yeah,
the kind of what the flavor of the month is.
yeah. And we do hear customers saying that sort of thing quite a lot. But what about the danger of creating new data silos with AI projects? Can you just end up
It's
with like dead pools of data, like from a CX point of view, and data you can't really do
Yeah,
much with?
yeah, if you can't use it, what's the point, right? And data scientists and AI resources are not cheap resources, so there's a particularly high importance for getting value out of some of these. Sometimes you see stats that upwards of 80 or 90% of AI projects that companies are trying to do actually fail. And so it's important that you're considering usage, like activation, with your AI projects, because um, these are very technical people who tend to work in very technical systems. And a lot of times, if you're not thinking about how those results are going to be activated, they might end up in a place where it's either going to take a long time or more work to get value out of it, even though it might be a great insight. You also see situations where the AI work has been done on like one person's computer, and it's not in production. It's not able to
Yeah, it's
get
a
out there.
true
Yeah,
science project.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's important to think about, not only how you're going to get data to your AI project, but how you're going to get data out of it. And I will say it's not only about the AI projects you're doing yourself, but all of your vendors probably are, using your data with AI in a particular way, like whether it's Google or Meta or, your marketing automation system might have an AI feature in it that so it's really not only your own AI projects, but the AI and all of these various systems that really demand that high quality data.
It's what you're talking about there, what you would refer to as data activation.
Exactly. Yeah. Data activation. Data activation is another one of those terms that some people mean a very specific thing with it, and some people just mean it very descriptively. Um, when I'm using it, I'm basically talking about making use of the data, which in um, Tealium's world, because we really focus on the data layer, that means sending the data to another system. So that might be an advertising system, that might be a CRM system where you're doing customer service out of. That could be marketing automation, that could be advertising, email tools, and then even analytics tools. Like even I would even consider that activating the data because you're sending the data somewhere for a particular purpose,
Or
um,
purpose, yeah.
to get value out of it.
Yeah, so you're about connecting the dots, if I'm understanding you correctly. Let's say combining an Adobe digital experience platform with maybe a Salesforce instance. Is that the kind of essence of what you're
Yeah,
doing? That you're connecting the dots between some of these systems?
very much so. I would say it does go beyond connecting the dots because we're
Yeah.
actually able to kind of enrich and add intelligence like in between. So, as the data might flow from one place to another, um, because of the fact that we have a good place in the stack where we can see data kind of across the whole stack. We can kind of add insights. So we can help say, hey, this person you're seeing in Adobe is the same person you saw over here in Salesforce. So that ultimately that multi-channel experience can make sense together instead of an experience in one channel that's totally self-contained and an experience in another channel that's totally self-contained, and they don't talk to each other. So Tealium provides that ability to connect the dots, but also to add intelligence. Like, what does it mean, when they're doing both something in this channel and something in this channel? What's the combined insight? And Tealium kind of gives you that.
Yeah, and the best way to bring a technology to life is to talk about how customers are connecting those dots and getting business value. I know you've got a couple of examples up your sleeve here, full disclosure, about how technology has brought business value to a couple of your customers. One's a US example, the other's a UK based example. We thought we'd take advantage of this forum to do a kind of
Yeah.
cross the pond kind of connection. So let's start with Direct TV, the American satellite TV provider. So I believe this was about using Tealium as a kind of foundational technology.
Yes, exactly. So when they presented at our customer conference that we had earlier in the summer, and they talked a lot about how their the guy who's in charge of their marketing technology talked about you rarely get the chance to start from scratch. So this first story is about starting from scratch, and the second story is more about, well, what happens when you've been around for a while. But yeah, DirecTV had the opportunity to think about their tech stack from scratch, and the first technology they picked in their tech stack was Tealium, because ultimately it goes back to that neutral approach that I talked about, where Tealium is really best friends with everybody. Like we are neutral. We when we show up, the other vendors love it because that means that they have better data to work with, which means that their tool is going to work better and their customer is going to get better results. So when DirecTV talks about picking Tealium, they basically talk about the fact that our neutrality was key to flexibility because they wanted to go with a best of breed technology. They didn't want to have restrictions, picking all the tools from one vendor. They wanted to pick one tool from here, one tool from there. And ultimately, in the future, if they change their mind, they don't want to have to start from scratch. So by having kind of a neutral partner, they kind of minimize that need. Now that doesn't mean they don't work with bigger vendors and have multiple products from certain vendors. It just means that they have us as kind of to help with that agility and flexibility. But ultimately, they went from a very manual data ecosystem where they were pulling their marketing lists very manually. They were uploading lists, into a different. So they download a list from one tool, upload it into a different tool. They didn't. Their experiences were very siloed in each channel. So the email channel only was using email data. The various channels weren't talking to each other. So the experiences that customers had were very siloed. They took that kind of view and they went to more of an automated view where their audiences were automatically syndicated into these channels from kind of a central location. And then they had a cross-channel understanding of customer identity, so they were able to kind of lead customers through a multi-channel journey as opposed to having them be siloed in the one channel. So ultimately it was building a best of breed stack to deliver an omni-channel customer journey, consistently and efficiently, and not requiring a whole bunch of manual data work.
Yeah, because what they were doing previously does sound very manual and very arduous, actually, to be honest. Now, let's turn to an older business in the UK, Legal in General, founded in 1836, not far from where our office in London is now in the city. What business problem were they trying to solve?
They were a digital transformation story. So they were very much trying to modernize their business and their technology practices. And they had the extra element of regulation, going alongside of what they were doing. The UK and Europe more generally, also very high regulatory requirements, and especially in financial services where you even have to prove that you're not trying to take advantage of people with what you're doing. So you really got to have a great mastery of your data. And when you're working with legacy technology, that just makes kind of the picture that much more difficult to work with. So Tealium kind of provided a common language or a fabric that could go across these data silos that they had been building up for years and years. They basically combined Tealium as the CDP with what they referred to as their marketing data zone, and their single view of the customer. So typically, a single view of the customer system is going to be managed by the IT team. The CDP is more, on the business side of things, trying to make use of the data for customer experience. So you talked about collaboration earlier. This kind of illustrates kind of how the technologies coming together actually brings the people together, because when we started adopting technology, it was kind of team by team. So we're kind of growing out of that now, where technology talks a little bit better, so people can now collaborate a little bit better around that view of the customer.
And ultimately, were Legal in General just trying to achieve better personalization for their customers? One of the guys talked about they had been optimizing to the average, but they wanted to get beyond optimizing to the average? Is that the kind of the drift of it?
Yeah, exactly. They were basically operating off of, yeah, an average view of their customer, so that they knew they had all the data was secure, and they could analyze it. But when Matt Parisi showed up on their website, they couldn't tell that it was me necessarily, and even if they could tell it was me, they didn't know all of the various things that other systems might have known about me. It was only in the one system where I was engaging at that time. So ultimately, yeah, it is about getting that data in one place so that you can really have an accurate view of what's going on, and then you can take the right next step. Offer the right next product, or tell them the next thing that they need to do to get value. And ultimately, legal in general, even though we talked about that them being around for a long time, they're using that customer profile as the basis for machine learning and AI insights as well. So that customer profile not only is a data source, but then it becomes the organizing foundation for how they activate those insights against that customer profile, because the action is really only important in the context of what I'm trying to do as an individual customer.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. I am a customer of Legal in General. I've got a couple of policies with them. And
Interesting.
interestingly, those policies would have been arranged face to face with someone in a branch. I mean, those days have gone, right? I mean, you're
Uh,
interacting with
Not
applications as a customer.
not totally though, right?
Yeah,
So
not
yeah,
totally.
integrating online and offline, another two great channels that need to come together. Talking about real time, for example.
Yeah.
You probably talk to them on the phone too. So you got in branch, on the phone, and on the website. And as a customer, or you're a customer of Legal General, I bet you, when you call them on the phone, you you don't think they only know the things that you've ever called them on the phone about. You expect that they know what you did on the website and what you've done in the branch when you've been
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Or else
Yeah.
you,
And
you
yeah.
probably judge them as not knowing you very well.
And I expect
So
them to know about the range of policies that I might or might not have.
mhm.
Um, so thinking about marketers specifically as a professional group, I mean, would you say that data is their ticket? Is their golden ticket to a seat at the table where truly strategic decisions are being made in a company or an organization?
I do. I think data is, again, I think data is, if not the most important, one of the most important things that a business could be strategizing cross functionally around. And if marketers do not um, bring a view or a perspective to the table as to how their data practices are producing more value, a lot of times IT teams aren't able to articulate, that customer experience and that business value. And then on the other side, um, data and analytics teams are generally, held to high standards around how they're budgeting and how their technology costs, keeping those under control. So it's really a complementary relationship between kind of the technical side of the house and kind of more of the business side of the house. And it gives both sides an opportunity to become more important, because of course IT wants to be looked at as a driver of growth and as a not as just a an organization that optimizes costs, and the business side of the house can bring that to the data that they're managing. And then on the flip side of it, the I the IT teams can help the marketing teams implement the insights that they need to work with, because the marketer is going to be customer facing, the customer experience professional is customer facing, so they have kind of are more in tuned with exactly the customer needs. And it's only by these two sides of the house kind of talking that the customer really wins at the end of the day.
So they can share the tickets. They can go to
Yeah,
the board They can go to the
Yeah.
board together.
Yeah.
And for organizations as such, I mean, how much do you think they need to differentiate competitively from their competitors and how they manage their customer data?
You already see you I think COVID kind of highlighted this. Actually, you already see how customers will change brands or change their loyalty kind of at the drop of a hat. If you haven't kind of developed that relationship and really kind of taken a emotional part of that person's life, that can impact your business. So um so yeah, you really have to maintain that relationship and really have value flowing both ways, of the customer getting value out of what you're doing, and you getting value out of what the customer is doing. Identity is actually a great example of this in the technology world. A lot of times you'll go to websites and they'll have like a coupon offer, or some other free content offer where they say, hey, give me your email address, or log in, and we'll give you this reward. And ultimately, that's what we call a value exchange, where the customer is saying, all right, you can see who I am, you can use my data, but you better you know give me an improvement, or else I'm going to go somewhere else. And when COVID happened and everybody, kind of the world was turned upside down, you saw what people found most important, and that was kind of convenience. When you could only do things online, when so those companies that really had set themselves up to be agile were the ones who reaped kind of the windfall. And some companies that weren't ready for that actually went under. So yeah, the providing value both ways is really important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is a very good way of putting the concept of competitive differentiation on how like you manage your data is to like think about recent history and put it in that kind of historical context.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's a lot of studies out there that show that when customers are deciding what to buy and how much to buy, one of the things that they want are speed, convenience, and sometimes you see product quality or product characteristics actually a little bit lower on the list. I think about myself. Here in the U.S., we might be a little bit more addicted to Amazon than around the world. But a lot of times I buy stuff on Amazon that's lower quality than what I would get maybe by walking down the street. But because it's going to show up, on my doorstep in a few hours, I'm okay, because of the convenience. The convenience wins out. So yeah, a lot of times the experience the customer is after is the most important thing, more important than the product itself.
That's
And data
such an interesting point. Yeah. Yeah.
and data is really the way that you can deliver that experience, because that's how
Yeah.
you understand what's going on.
Yeah. And Amazon is a massive data machine.
Mhm.
And you touched on this earlier, Matt, about the importance of consented data. I mean, that's what we need to be bearing in mind here.
Very true. Yeah, we're getting to a point in the world where, either by technology restrictions, things like Apple restricting the data that advertisers are allowed to use out of their phones, to regulatory changes like GDPR. I forget the name of the UK's regulation, but you have one as well. They're cropping up around the world too. They're coming up in Japan and Thailand and all these various places around the world. It's state by state in the United States. So California actually has different laws than Texas. Um, and when we work with a lot of global businesses, and when you think about that on a global scale, it becomes a tough thing to manage. Um, and but your trust is at stake. Your trust with the customer is at stake. So it's worth it, to make sure that not only are you not going to get fined by the government, but that you're going to meet the expectations of the customer at the end of the day. And ultimately, we've got a world here where if you're a customer and you walk through the consent door, your customer experience is going to be much richer, because the company is going to understand you a lot more, which means that there's going to be more value created in that relationship, which is a better outcome for the business. If the customer does not walk through the consent door, they're going to get a generic experience, which is going to produce less value. So it's a real economic opportunity for brands to be managing that consent in a strategic way and thinking about that value exchange. I talked about the value exchange earlier, and what you're giving the customer and what you're getting in return, so that you can create that differentiated customer experience.
But the underpinning of all of that has to be, well, it's better if it is an overarching data governance and management strategy. You
True.
know, data governance cannot always seem like kind of a dull subject, but it's vitally important.
And, yeah, and you think about, if you just get the data right when you collect it, how many places are going to use that data? Yeah, and it's only adding. I don't know if you've ever seen what's called the Martech super graphic, but Scott Brinker is well known over here
Oh,
in the
yeah,
U.S.
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
creating this massive graphic of
Mm,
all the different marketing
wow.
technologies. I think it's over
Mm.
like 15,000 at this point, and the average company uses something like 400 different software packages. So data governance. Well, yeah, it's kind of like eating your vitamins, or
Yeah.
doing your exercise. It definitely pays off doing it. And I'll say, we talked about marketers versus kind of the more technical side of the house. The more technical side of the house has been doing data governance for forever. So I think it'll be a breath of fresh air if their marketing business partners come in and they're worried about the data quality. They want the data quality to be good, and the more both sides of the house kind of understand each other, and I think data is the right medium, to make that, or the right catalyst to make that happen. The customer is the one who wins at the end of the day. So
That's this really strong message that I've been taking away from our conversation, and hopefully, I'm sure the audience will be taking that away too. Matt, before we close, any kind of parting words of advice for our audience about getting the most out of their customer data? Just like one or two.
Yeah, I would just say that, I think data is one of the few things to really, use as a foundation for customer experience, and really be that kind of cross functional medium or catalyst, that can help, the business kind of break down silos and ultimately deliver a more consistent customer experience. And even though we talked about regulations and customer expectations are on the rise around privacy. Even as data, becomes more restricted and a little bit smaller, that little core of data that you have that comes out of engaging with your customers is really one of your most valuable assets, because that, you know not only can that be used across a whole bunch of channels, but over time your understanding of the customer never becomes not valuable. And it becomes, and if you intentionally build this foundation, it can become this vehicle that for your agility, so that as technology changes, as customer behavior changes, you still have this view of the customer that you can plug new technology into, to ultimately, stay ahead of the market and continue to differentiate out there, and be ready when things like COVID happen, so that you don't become a
Yeah,
dinosaur. So
yeah.
yeah.
Let's hope that doesn't happen again too soon. And privacy
Ah,
first as well.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Look, sadly, this is all we have time for on this occasion. You can learn more about Tealium at tealium.com. I really recommend the resources link there. There's some fabulous customer stories. It just remains for me to say thank you ever so much, Matt. I really can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a
And
pleasure.
yeah, absolute pleasure. And thank you so much to you, our audience, for your attention. So from Matt and myself, goodbye.